Why can't I get video? There we go. Hi, Maria.
Mute. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good.
And there's Colin.
Okay.
Hello.
All right, I was trying trouble logging in here, so.
Yeah, I was having trouble tonight too, so.
Oh, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Nah.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I recently got a new computer, so I haven't done a video call on it, so.
Narissa's going to be late coming in.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So I'm just gonna be a fly on the wall in the beginning, I guess, because I missed the last meeting, and maybe you can get me up to speed.
Did you read the notes that Billy posted?
Billy, I only saw Narissa's minutes so far.
Billy was supposed to have everything up online. Excuse me. I don't think he got the video up from last time, but I know he got the notes up from last time. It may not have been Billy. It may have been Larry, but somebody from staff was supposed to be putting everything up online. Speaking of staff, do I see Larry muted?
I don't know.
I don't know. Hi, Andy.
Hello.
Well, we should be starting. Bit of trivia while we're waiting. Today, people should wear red for missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Oh, I should have wore. Oh, I did wear a paisley tie with some red in it.
Good. Yeah, we had another Indigenous woman murdered last weekend, so I don't know what the number is up to now, but it's outrageous.
Yeah, I think I saw a story about it. About the is there like a serial killer or something?
No, it's across the country. At least 70 cities across the country have reported missing and or murdered Indigenous women, and we don't know what the county count is, but literally in just about every state. And it's because people say, well, nobody will notice because, they're just Indian.
Oh, that's awful.
It is awful. It's really an epidemic. There's Matt and Rob.
It's like romper room.
I know. Actually, I'm old enough to want to say it's like the Mickey Mouse Club at the end where we go, hi, I'm.
Hello, everybody.
Matt, are you with us?
Hey guys, sorry about that. Got a bad
That's
internet.
okay. Hiya, Matt.
Doing all right. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Like Larry's having issues too.
Yep. I'm looking. I cannot record. Is there somebody? Oh, it says it is being recorded. Okay, somebody's recording it. Okay, Narissa, as I said, is going to be late. She texted me to let me know that they got a late start to their meeting. So we have a quorum.
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry. I was having a little bit of issue with my internet's down at home, and at first I couldn't get to unmute me, but I got on there now.
Well, I think we have a quorum. Matt, do you want to talk about what you're proposing that you posted this morning?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I just, seizing on the momentum from Colin and Robert's proposal, it seemed like they made some pretty good headway. And we talked about some of the points in there where we didn't have complete agreement. So that was just another attempt to get us closer to something that we can discuss tonight. And I took the homework assignment seriously, which was put down your thoughts, put down in writing something that we could start hashing out. And I'm happy to go through anything in there. I'm not wed to any of it or all of it, but I do think it moves us closer to where we, to kind of, in my opinion, to kind of unanimity and an end goal. And I appreciate Colin raising some concerns with it, because I think that's a healthy discussion to have, to hash those out and any other concerns folks might have.
I say let the hashing begin.
So I just have a practical question, if I can. Matt, you and Andy have forwarded this notion that the code of ethics should not be tied to the business of SPJ, and I think that's where a lot of the disconnect is, and the loss of faith in SPJ leadership. So what does following the code of ethics not allow SPJ to do as a business?
Could I take this? Because I actually had a thought about this that I think may help explain why this is not the right position, actually in a way that I think you will appreciate.
So Andy, I totally want to hear it, but I really want to hear from our future president first.
Sure, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I mean, it's pretty straightforward to me. The code of ethics is designed to be a document that lays out how journalists should conduct journalism. It's not designed to dictate or suggest how SPJ should handle its business. And this is a business decision, which is, if we want to address ethical issues, then we should address ethical issues in the document. Sponsorship policy, I mean by document. But I think combining the two is not how the code of ethics was envisioned. And I haven't asked, but I'd be curious to know how, like, the Lynn Walshes and Andrew Siemens of the world would respond to it. They have, as much as anyone, spent time with that document, know it in and out, backwards and forwards. And I think, we're interested to see what they have to say, because, again, that document is not designed to address the business issues of SPJ. It's designed to showcase ethical journalism, and it does it very, very well. It does it internationally.
Sure.
But I think if we want to do ethical, if you want to bring in ethics to this document, then we should put in ethics in the document, but not the code of ethics. I just think they're completely, if you draw a Venn diagram, I don't think those two overlap.
So, but I think that's a central issue. I think the membership And if you listen to those debates and you see the resolutions that come up and up, they're saying the SPJ does not follow its own code of ethics. So
they don't
I think I think that
what it is.
no, but if you listen to those debates, that is the concern. That's the disconnect from your membership. And I think I just want to return to my just basic original question to you, Matt, as a incoming president. What does the code of ethics keep the SPJ leadership from doing?
The code of ethics is designed to offer suggestions on how journalists should conduct journalism. It's not designed to suggest ways that SPJ should handle its business dealings.
Right. So you're saying it doesn't prohibit the inner workings of SPJ. It doesn't provide a obstacle, because I can't understand the objection, because that code of ethics is about our values and transparency. We believe so much in it that we offer it as a flyer, as a poster, and a two-sided bookmark that you can download. So I'm trying to understand what the objection is and how those values aren't reflected in the way that we do business. So I don't know how I can.
Excuse me, could I try to explain something here, Rob? That is, I was in the room when we created the Green Light Code of Ethics. Andy, remember that back in 95?
I wasn't there, but I'm familiar.
I was.
Narissa was. We were in the room, and one of the things we talked about was the fact that business ethics and journalism ethics are totally separate things. They are totally different. And what we were doing is we were developing a code of ethics for journalists, not for business people, for journalists. Narissa?
Yeah, just historically, the code has been about the practice of journalism. SPJ has historically said we are not going to inject ourselves into the business operations of other organizations. That's historically just a note there to offer some clarification, I hope.
Can I just take a stab at this? I don't think we're getting at Robert's point, and I think that a different way to explain it might make it more clear. So what the Code of Ethics is, it's a voluntary set of guidelines, but what it really is are questions that you ask yourself. And if you go through it and you look at avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived, what does that mean? Well, it means probably something different to everybody here, perhaps. And so if you're going to say company X needs to follow the code of ethics, what does that really mean? Let's just play this out to the extreme. They sit down and they say, avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived. Now are you going to say, great, you followed the code of ethics? No, because what really matters is what happens next. And 3 different organizations may consider that 3 different ways. And you know what? I consider avoid conflict of interest that everybody in my family is going to be hired by the business, and we're going to have this nepotism. You say, oh, well, that's not ethical, but that's not the point. If you ask the question and then you choose your own answer, what you're looking for is the ethical behavior. What the code is the practice of asking yourself the question. That's the difference. So to say you follow the code of ethics is kind of misunderstanding what the process is.
So I don't think I misunderstand. I'm just asking what the code of ethics keeps SPJ from doing. Again, it's about transparency and responsibility. In many ways, we say, this is who we are, these are our values. And if we don't conduct ourselves with those values in the way we do businesses, the way we do business deals, and the way we put on conventions, then you have a huge disconnect. And that's what you're seeing. That's why this has gone on 3 years in a row. And so for the SPJ leadership to say, oh, no, the code of ethics doesn't apply to us, that's dangerous, and that's a disconnect from your membership.
Well, Robert, let me just ask you a question, though, and I'm just going to bring Coke into this for a second. And let's just say Coke considered itself a news organization, and they decided that their values are they're going to attack journalists from other organizations. They're going to try to tear them down to further themselves. You're going to say, well, that's unethical. And I'm going to agree that that's unethical. But what Coke can say is, you know what? I looked at the code of ethics and I said, I see a term here that's, that I think applies to that. And therefore, I'm following the code of ethics. So what's your response? No, you're not following the code of ethics. The code doesn't tell you the behavior. The code tells you the question to ask yourself. And how you interpret it is entirely a different thing.
Sure, but I don't think it's up to us. We are the SPJ. This is our policy. These are our core values. I am not seeing any clear argument
it's not a policy,
as to.
Though. It's not a policy. It's a series of questions.
I don't see how our code of ethics cannot guide our business practices. Again, it's a reflection of us. So
well, it starts out with journalists should. It's a guideline for doing journalism.
Right, but Andy and Matt, don't you see that saying the code of ethics does not apply to the SPJ leadership, how dangerous that is?
I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know what that means. What do you mean it doesn't apply to the leadership? The leadership can ask these questions when they do journalism too.
So again, I am saying it should apply not only to journalists, it's not an abstract with journalists working out in the field. It is our core values as journalists and how we conduct ourselves. And if we don't conduct ourselves, again, with transparency and with responsibility and accountability, then we are lost. And in fact,
Well,
that is part of the reason.
But now you're getting to I think what you're trying to do, but I think you're actually getting there by actually naming the values. So you say, what are our values? Our values are not, we sit down and ask ourselves questions because that's what a code of ethics is. But the headings, seek truth and report it. We consider the idea that truth matters to be a core value. Well, now you're getting somewhere by saying we prefer organizations that show a pursuit of accuracy, that show a pursuit of sensitivity. Now you're getting to something that's specific. That's
Sure.
not what the code of ethics is. Those are values that are attached to it. So I actually think I support what you're doing. It's just you can't get the question part in there. Like starts with what the values are.
I think that is a semantic argument. I really do.
No, it's very important because we have written into the code a preamble that says these are not a series of rules, and we resist any attempt to consider them rules of conduct. They're not. It's written right there.
Again, I just want to ask this question. What does adopting our code of ethics into our business practices keep us from doing?
Well, I'd ask a question back to you, Robert. Is why, if what this group wants to do is include ethics as a guide post, let's include ethics as a guidepost. But let's not do it through the guise of the ethics code, because the ethics code is not meant to govern business. It's meant to govern journalism. I think that there are some elements of the ethics code we can pull out, we can extract, we can put into this policy. I'm fine with that. I think that's what Andy just said. And it sounds like that's why I think that we can all find some common ground here. I just don't think the ethics code is the cloak that we want to wrap ourselves in on this thing, because it's really, like I said, with that Venn diagram, if you drew a Venn diagram, there is no overlap between the practice and conduct of journalism and then the business decisions that guide this organization. There's just,
see, and I fundamentally disagree. That I could not disagree more.
Oh, I've taught business ethics. Trust me, there is a massive difference.
So, no, how we define and how we conduct ourselves as journalists, as an organization, we say this is who we are. And again, if you guys don't think so, I think that's why there is such friction. So, and maybe I'm alone. I'm not hearing other voices.
Hello? Bueller? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So, Robert, I tend to agree with you. I think the policy that we have now does mention ethical behavior. And Matt actually posted our mission statement earlier, and I would like to just perhaps copy and paste language directly from our own mission, which is encouraging the free practice of journalism and stimulating high standards of ethical behavior, and just pasting that right into our sponsorship policy. That first line, the society, which Matt included, society of professional journalists at conventions and other events will seek sponsors, partners, exhibitors, and advertisers that are consistent with our mission to encourage the free practice of journalism and stimulating high standards. I think even the high standards was added to that mission to go to one up to +1 ethical behavior. And that was an intentional move by the drafters of that mission statement. So I think just replacing that first line at the end, just to say, with our mission to encourage the free practice of journalism and stimulating high standards of ethical behavior, period. I mean, I think that gets to the heart of it, right? I don't know. I mean, is that not enough?
Yes, definitely.
Is there a way to do an insert into the thread
Yes.
so that we can put that where Colin wants it put so that we can read it for continuity?
Yeah, we all have access to the we all have access to the Google Doc. So I'll call it up, and if one of you guys wants a drive, I think that's a perfect idea, and that's what I was trying to get at, Robert. Is like I think we can get what you're saying in there in the way that Colin just articulated, and I think that
the principles.
we all agree on that. The idea gets in there. It's just not saying code of ethics.
Right.
Can somebody remind me of the address for the Google Doc, or where I can find it, please?
It's in that Slack. It's in the Slack channel from today, and SPJ sponsorships.
Okay.
Here, I need that too.
I just want to say too that I think it's also, I mean, the whole, just to step back a second, the whole origin of this controversy is, like Robert is saying, because there's a perception, and to call on Andy, what Andy was saying before, conflict of interest, real or perceived. When someone's perception is that we are not in line with our mission, that is their reality. Right. So they will not become a member of our organization because they feel like it's not true to the mission that SPJ is founded on. SPJ is known globally because of our ethics code. It's not because of our programming or SDX award or something. SPJ's brand is centered on its ethics code. It's taught in schools. Everyone just knows of SPJ because even if they're not a member, they know the ethics code. So I think trying to separate it. I kind of see what you're saying, like not trying to be the legal body that enforces or punishes people that are unethical. That's fine, but I think just like trying to wholesale separate them is just not something, not the reality of what we should be doing. Especially because our membership is dependent on us staying true to our mission, which I just read.
Yeah, I'm in the doc now, and I'm happy to make that. What part of the mission did you want to include?
So just at that first sentence in your policy, just where it says that are consistent with our mission to encourage the free practice of journalism and stimulating high standards of ethical behavior.
The free practice of journalism and like this.
By the way, somebody needs to change the battery in their smoke alarm.
That's me, I think.
I think you're on mute, Maria. I don't think it's you.
I just added that part in about encouraging those who plan chapter and local meetings to adhere to this policy as well, because that was something we did approve as a group in last week's meeting. I wanted to make sure that made it in here as well.
We're saying we encourage the free practice of journalism?
Could we please leave freedom of speech in too?
I mean, that's just straight from our mission statement.
What do we consider the free practice of journalism?
Not sure I understand the question.
What does it mean? I don't know what it means. Like you can freely practice it? Or can we just say something about First Amendment rights or privileges or?
Here's the language from the mission statement.
This is, which mission statement is this?
This is ours. Here, I'm going to drop this back in the Slack channel too.
Okay.
It's in there, but it kind of got buried.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So I'm critiquing our own mission statement,
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, Robert, I don't know. Is that a compromise for you? I mean, what do you think?
I am just worried. Again, I see this over and over, and I think we're part of different groups that only want the best for SPJ and its future. And this is a perception that we need to understand, because it will just cause division. If we are not aligned with our own values and ethics, and again, transparency, responsibility, that came up today with our massive deficit. If that is not fixed, we're just going to lose more members. And because of some of the questionable sponsors that we've let in, it's just going to continue to erode that trust. So I think we need to be vigilant if we're going to survive as an organization. And we need to reflect our core values and how we conduct ourselves, not only in the field, but how we put together conventions and how we conduct business. If we don't, just saying, hey, our code of ethics doesn't apply to the way we do business, or it doesn't apply to the SPJ as an organization, that's very dangerous.
I'm with you until that last line though. And I understand there's a perception that people might say, oh, we'll follow the code of ethics. And you say, well, you don't understand. And they can just keep pressing ahead and saying, no, you have to follow the code of ethics. I mean, what, facts matter. Fact is, it's not a set of rules, and people might need some education, but what I support is what I think is the intent, which is the ethics. Like we want ethics behind these decisions. And I say, great, let's, try to verbalize that. So I will resist every attempt to try to say code of ethics must be followed, because it's just misunderstanding what the code is.
And in the draft we have here, we're not saying that we're throwing out the code of ethics. The wording that we're looking at now does not say we don't care about the code of ethics. We're not going to follow it.
It's the values that matter.
Right, but that has to matter in the behavior as well. And I think, again, this is where the conflict has been, and
Okay. Go ahead, Robert. Finish your thought, please, sir.
No, let's keep going.
So do we want then to punt back to an earlier suggestion I had made to draft a majority policy and a minority policy, or do we want to proceed on what we are working on right now? Love you all mean it, but I don't want to do one of these for 2.5 hours every week between now and April 1.
I don't either. I don't think we need to meet every week.
Yeah. I think we're making progress. How does everyone else feel?
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still optimistic that we can get total agreement on a policy, because I think the principles that Robert is fighting for, I want to fight for those too.
Yeah.
I just think it's like I said, it's whether it's called the code of ethics or the ethical principles that we want to put in there, which Colin, but I mean, I love the idea of like layering all of our policies and because then we can show people we took this so seriously. And now our mission statement aligns with our sponsorship. Like, you can't get more ethical and more transparent, in my opinion, than that. That's perfect.
So I hope that's what we can achieve. I also want to just ask not a point of order, but I guess a trajectory. So let's say everybody on this panel comes and we all agree on a policy. So is it just our recommendation to the board?
Yes, that was why I published the interpretation on the bylaws. We put what we can in front of the board, what we have ready in front of the board, and then they, according to the resolution that established this task force, the board is responsible for putting something in front of the membership 120 days before the next national convention. And then on the convention floor, delegates will then say, vote, etc., based on what the board puts before them.
Narisa, if I could just like kind of dissect the language in the resolution, those recommendations will be considered by the board, which is kind of a open-ended idea.
Yeah, they are not obligated because they are the board.
Yeah.
My hope is they will be attentive and consider what we are putting before them, and that they will let the delegates make a decision on it. There's also an opportunity in that 120-day window for feedback that could go back to the board before something is along the lines of a resolution would actually be put in front of the delegates.
But what I'm looking at is the specific meaning of the words in this resolution. Will be considered by the board could mean anything. They could say, okay, we talked about it for 2 minutes. But what it also says is shared with all members, so it has to go beyond the board. And then it says a proposal will be brought before the delegates. And what that does not specify is that it has to go through the board to adopt something, or the board just looks at it. And what we suggest could just simply pass through and go right to the delegates, or it could even not go through the board and go to the delegates. I mean, the board will see it, but it doesn't.
It's my understanding that our work is done when we submit our report to the board April 1. Robert has his hand up, and then we'll go to Matt.
Sure, and so that's why I want to encourage us here in this meeting to find consensus, and again, find a language that reflects our code and recognizes why this has been an issue 3 years running and why we've had such problems. I want to come at it head on, and I want to make a clear recommendation to the board because honestly, I don't have a lot of faith that the board will adopt it. There have been no profiles in courage on that board. And so I think having all of us here and agreeing on a strongly worded recommendation, that can help. Again, that being said, I am not optimistic that it'll be adopted, but I can hope.
Well, if I may, Matt, before we go forward, I agree. I think if we are unanimous, that will have more power. And I certainly will lobby for us to have some space in Quill so that we can lay out our case, lay out the discussions that we had and are having as a way to inform members and increase the transparency. This is what our deliberations were. We did not just say, oh, well, you know, we added a few whereases and herefores to the current policy and said, you know, good luck with it. I would like for members to get that deep dive into all the considerations that we are making, because again, I think that promotes better feedback. And I think that gives the board more things to consider rather than just the wording of this. If they get to see behind the door of our discussion, the jury deliberations, if you will, I think it would be much harder for them to say, well, it was a fine exercise and done, moving on. Okay, Matt, I promised you a chance to speak up.
Well, let's do the math. There's 9 members on the board. One of them's here. If we have unanimity, then one board member supports that proposal. And I would argue that there are some profiles in courage on that board. And I would argue that I'm a pretty persuasive dude. And if you guys all agree on a proposal and I take it to the board, all I gotta do is get 4 other people to agree that they don't want to walk into another angry convention and to have chapters with pitchforks coming at us. And look at this group. You have Chicago, you have New York, you have Los Angeles, you have San Diego. Those are some of our biggest chapters whose members are going
Washington.
Huh?
Washington, D.C.
And Washington. Sorry, dude.
We're populated by dudes, it appears. What does that mean for us, Becky and Maria?
Some flyover.
I know, right?
We're in trouble.
My point is this. My point is, you may not think we're courageous, but we're smart, committed, passionate realists. And we see the writing on the wall. And that's why I spent a big chunk of my holiday weekend, when I could have been easily playing with my daughters, working up a proposal that I thought would get us a big part of the way to a compromise. Not that it was the be all and end all in the final version, but that would get us to a good conversation tonight. And I would think that it has got us to a good conversation tonight, that there is the possibility, the very real likelihood of unanimity, because just as the board realizes that people are breathing down our necks, we realize that, I think this group realizes that unanimity stands a much better chance of getting a good policy in place than 2 provisions or one that has a divided vote and that we can't really agree on. And if all that we disagree on is whether this new sponsorship policy should say code of ethics or should say a high standard of ethical behavior, I mean, I think that is agreement by default right there, because we are saying the same things, just using different letters to dress it up.
Why don't we
I would think that we're there. That we're very, very close.
Thank you, Martyr Matt. Andy.
Why don't we just start looking at some of the changes that Matt has proposed, because this could actually decide if we are still in agreement or not.
Okay, yeah, let's, we want to read through that now. Also, I'm asking, not insisting, do we want that clause that I tacked in there just for consideration that collaborating is not an endorsement of anyone's business operations, or do we want to leave that out?
Where is that one?
I threw that in there because that seemed to be some of the way the discussion was going last week. Let me see if I can find it. I put it in the Slack channel.
It's in the Slack.
In the reply, promotional materials shall include a disclaimer that joining with SPJ to provide educational opportunities is not an endorsement of any organization's business practices. Whether that will be something that you would want, you know, in the program or on the EIJ website, I don't know. I mean, I just threw it in there because that was some of the discussion last week.
It seems like a disclaimer we shouldn't have to make, because we shouldn't be in bed with people who do not reflect our values. Like, if we have to have a disclaimer like that, then we should just not have them.
Okay. Anybody else? All right.
Well, I mean, if we come back to the whole Google and Facebook thing, and you know, we're not shutting them out as of now, but there can be people that are upset with having some tie to either one of them. So I don't have a strong feeling. I actually like that disclaimer, but I understand Robert's point. It's like starting to water down what we do because we expect we might have some, you know, bad hombres.
Yeah.
Joel?
Yeah, I just want to second Robert here. I think he makes a good point, and I think it is somewhat superfluous and confuses the issue. If we have to kind of disavow people that we're working with, then, you know, a lot of people are going to say, why are you bothering to work with them? So.
All right. So, Matt, I think, do we have everything in? Colin, did we get your part added that you had suggested so that we have something we can look at and continue to make changes or vote on?
Yeah, I added that in, worded it, and how I actually, upon further review, what it shows in Slack is a little bit different than the actual wording in the mission, but I think it's still okay. I put it in there with a comment.
Okay.
I'm sorry, where is it? Which channel?
Matt put it in a Google document, and the link is in the folder that says hashtag SPJ sponsorships in the Slack channel. So Joel, if you'll click on that, you bring up the living document. That way we can go in and do live edits. Whereas with Slack, we're just like replying, and we can't get the changes inserted into the proper place.
Got
So
it. This is the one that's labeled SPJ sponsorship policy.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, Maria, did you find it?
I think so.
Yeah, it's a link to the Google document. So you should see docs.google.com in your URL spot. Larry, are you there? Have you found it? So is everybody looking at the same thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I got it.
All right.
Okay.
I see that little trail that says vigilance and protection of the First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and of the press. Is that part of it? It's a sentence fragment. I'm just asking.
I don't know where that came from.
I dropped that in there. That's actually the verbatim language from the mission statement. That was, I think there was a discussion earlier about what free practice of journalism meant and whether we should, the same way we're using the verbatim language of high standards of ethical behavior, whether we should use that. So that was just there in case anyone wants to sub it in or discuss that.
Okay, so do we want to say the yellow part, encourage the free practice of journalism, to instead say to exercise vigilance in protection of the First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and of the press?
Leave the yellow part in, but then find a conjunction to add it to the second part there, starting with vigilance.
Okay.
Yes, I second that. I agree.
Yeah. Agreed. What conjunction?
Okay.
Oh, good question. Let me think.
How about and promote? I'm grabbing the wheel here, Matt.
How about and remain vigilant?
Yeah, and remain vigilant.
I like it.
With our mission to encourage and
Remain
vigilant.
Yeah, that keeps it active.
Yeah.
Yep. And protection of the First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and of the press. Do we want to say of the news media to get away from a print term or not?
News media is fine. I want to suggest this is great, but this is now a 5-line sentence. So if we can break it in the middle.
Very long sentence.
I have no problems breaking this into 2 sentences. I really don't. That's kind of what I was thinking there a minute ago.
Well, I do think there's also a certain redundancy between encourage the free practice of journalism, which says in 6 words, what remain vigilant in protection of the First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and of the news media says.
Matt, I like that adding it sort of put a finer point on it. So I actually liked it as it stood as a single sentence because I think it gets to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. Okay.
I would also say free practice is one thing. Vigilant protection is
I agree.
something stronger.
No, you guys are right. You guys are right.
But yeah, there's probably a tighter way to say it.
So
SPJ believes vigilance in the protection.
Now you're back in the passive voice.
Yeah.
Is vigilant.
Yeah. Is or pursues vigilant protection.
That's good.
Got it.
Of the First Amendment, comma. So now we have a guarantees thing.
And guarantees freedom of speech and of the news media.
no, you just take out guarantees.
It's First Amendment guarantees of, it's two guarantees, freedom of speech and of the news media.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's plural, so it's guarantees, both of those guarantees.
Yeah, I also was reading it as a verb. So
Oh, okay.
apologies.
That's okay.
We've changed. Have we changed from freedom of the press to news media?
I just was throwing that out there so that we get away from that strictly print term. Another thing that people sometimes say, we're the old dying newspaper organization. I don't know. I just threw that out there.
The old dying First Amendment language.
My thought was not that way, but just that we have decided to open our doors to anybody committing the act of journalism we consider somebody we protect, and not necessarily based on a commercial or nonprofit organization. It could be an individual, but I don't know. Maybe it's not that important.
I think that's a strong first paragraph.
Okay.
Any other what do we want to say? Any other discussion on first paragraph?
I feel like that. Sorry to be that guy again, Matt.
Guy.
But I feel like that second sentence now is kind of, it feels isolated to me. It kind of just, it's dangling there. Not really like a call to action related to our policy, you know?
I disagree.
It just says that we pursue this, but it's not.
It's a further comment on mission. Our mission is this, and here's what else we value.
I mean, the first sentence ties it directly to sponsors, partners, exhibitors, advertisers. We'll seek these that are consistent with, but then the second sentence is just kind of out there. It doesn't really tie it to the
So Colin,
sponsors, partners, exhibitors, and advertisers.
Colin, let me suggest that it sets up the middle graph that we're going to tackle here. Like we want vigilant protection. Therefore, anybody who attacks journalists or has propaganda or disinformation, I think it just sets up the middle paragraph or the bullet points.
It sets it up as a transition.
And I changed a little wording there to say SPJ's mission also includes vigilant protection to make sure that both parts are in the mission. Does that make it any better, Colin?
I mean, it's informative, I guess, but
It's a transition sentence.
The original mission page has everything bullet pointed so that they're all tied together. You just want to go back to that so that they're all under the rubric of encourage,
that would be really strong if we were to say any funder or affiliated entity pursues vigilant protection of the First Amendment, guarantees the freedom of speech and of the news media. But, that's pretty narrow at the same time.
All right, here's a suggestion, because I think what you do with that second sentence is you lose the connectivity between sponsors. I think someone just made this point, between sponsors and that was now the third sentence. So what I would propose is ethical behavior period, and then go into the goals of such arrangements will be to enhance and not to tarnish SPJ's credibility and image as the nation's premier professional journalism organization, comma, which vigilantly protects First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and the news media.
That's good.
I like,
I like
it.
that.
I like that.
Well,
Much better.
you can't say which, because then you're modifying organization instead of wait a minute.
That. Use that.
Why don't we just do this?
I think this is going to be some incredibly delicious sausage that we're making here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what that's like, Larry. You get a bunch of journalists together and we copy edit everything to death. We copy edit it down to where it doesn't mean anything, and then we can kill it and vote it down and move on.
I feel like I'm listening to the space on landing.
Yeah, well, just hold your nose.
Matt could relate to this. This is the worst part about writing editorials, because you write them by committees sometimes.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Fun. Super fun.
Yeah.
What's the expression? You should never watch laws or sausage being made.
Exactly. Well, and if I just want to quickly interject here. I think my only comment here, and having said that, well, I think what's being developed here fits into that is, I want something that's going to be helpful for at least me and others when really looking at the potential partners for EIJ, but not at the same time not be overly restrictive. And I think what you guys have developed so far, I think provides that, at least for me, speaking just for myself as a development director.
Well, I think that's incumbent on us is to draft something that provides guidance, because as I've said before, it's not fair if we don't do our job right for then the board and headquarters crew to be blamed because we didn't articulate what we needed to articulate. So appreciate that, Larry. All right, so I made that little cut and bait switch there, cut and paste. Any further comments on paragraph 1? Since I pulled a sentence out of there and moved it.
I like paragraph 1, how it is now. I think it's strong.
Okay. Other comments? We're not voting on it paragraph by paragraph. We're just drafting paragraph by paragraph, if everybody's all right with that process.
Yep.
Okay, paragraph 2. Other comments, suggestions, grammar?
I think again, it's like the connective tissue there that Matt noted. It just feels like it's missing. I don't know if we can wordsmith that a little bit more to connect those two thoughts together.
Matt, would you mind?
How about this, which seeks to something like this?
Matt, would you mind just to copy and paste the whole mission statement, or is that too long? And just kind of stick it in there at the end of paragraph 2 so we can look at it in its entirety?
Yeah, happy to do that.
And then let me put a couple spaces in here so we have room to separate it from the other things we're looking at.
Let me see if I can.
That may help us extract the language we're looking for a little more efficiently.
There you go.
So it just says a practice of journalism. It doesn't even say the free practice of journalism, does it?
Nope.
Okay. Because as we know, nothing's free. Joel, go ahead.
Just a very small point. It may be taken care of if we cut and paste some of this mission statement in there, but the more I looked at that word also include, the weaker it seemed. It makes it seem like those commitments are an afterthought. And I would just drop the word also. Maybe when we cut and paste some of this stuff in, the word also won't even be in there. But looking at the previous sentence, when we had mission also includes, also made it just sound like it was sort of tacked on and not as central as the other things, and it just sort of bugged me a little.
It's gone.
Yes, I'm happy.
Yeah, I think the way that it's been recast here works for me. I mean, I don't think I'm not hung up on the which.
Yeah. My only suggestion is it just gets a little long, and SPJ's credibility and image, and as the nation's premier professional organization, I would love it as 2 sentences, but
That,
perfect. I like it.
Yeah, that's better because it looked like the image is
No, I think that's an
a
elegant.
lot worse. Yeah, I think there's a misplaced modifier there. So yeah, I agree with that too.
Great.
Okay, other comments on paragraph 2?
I like it now.
Okay,
It works.
do we want to incorporate any of the other bullet points from the mission? Thanks, Matt, for pasting that in for us to look at.
happy to. One of the things I really love Colin's suggestion to more closely mirror the mission statement and include it in here. And I will think that this whole thing is strengthened, and the whole policy is set up with the last words being ethical behavior in that first graph. I think that really lets people know what we're getting at. But I do think what's lost is diversity, and I just throw it out there for the board's discussion. Do we want to mention diversity? It's obviously something we strive and don't always succeed at incorporating. I do think it would be a important thing to include. And I think if someone came, that didn't value diversity or that had a history of some trouble with diversity, that could be a reason to exclude them. And including that word somehow might, I don't know, maybe that's smart. What does the group think?
Well, I think that it would really encourage our fellow journalism associations of color, because I know that I spoke with Naja last week after our last meeting, and they said one of the reasons they didn't really want to come back with us for a while was because they didn't feel valued. And that speaks directly to the diversity issue. So, if we're going to reach out to NAHJ and NAJA and Asian journalists and the LGBTQA community, then we should have in there something about diversity.
So I agree with that, but where it makes sense.
How about something like this? We could even include fosters excellence among journalists, because this gets to the point Robert made. It makes it wordier, but not too wordy, maybe.
How about if we put it in the first graph instead of at the end of the second graph? Encourage free practice of journalism, foster diversity, stimulate high standards, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That elevates it.
I think it fits better there than in the second one.
Well, then do you need to
That
include
works.
one of our other pillars, which is open government, FOI?
Well, I just wonder if we're getting a little too top heavy, trying to sort of throw everything in that we're doing instead of more narrowly focusing on specifically sort of what gave rise to this whole problem of sponsorship.
Yeah, I think personally, I think the first 2 paragraphs as they read now are pretty strong. If we can move to the bullet points, I think. Does anybody else agree with that?
I agree. Should I just delete the rest of our mission statement then? We don't need any more from that, do we?
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah,
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
And let's pull this back up here a little bit. Whoop. Did I go too fast, Matt?
Yep.
Whoop. Did we lose one? Okay, there we go. I need to let you take the wheel for sure, Matt.
10-4.
This is Rob. I'm just adding bullet points.
Okay.
I love the fact Rob is listed as anonymous chameleon.
Yeah, I have like an anonymous frog, an anonymous quagga. What's that? An anonymous gopher.
I just want to know how
Horace.
much Matt was able to put his name on one of those two things.
Because it's his document.
That's why.
Don't
Okay.
keep sharing my secrets, man. Come on.
Yeah. I was like, I want a name too.
What is a quagga?
By the way, for anybody who's listening to this, no one's going to understand what we're talking about.
Well, if they can understand what we write, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
That's all we need.
Did I do that right, Matt?
Well, here, it looks like this, I think starting here, these aren't bullet points because they don't reflect limitations, right?
I'll leave it to you to fix.
Yeah, I think if we, boom, I think the bullet points are right there. And just again, to reiterate, one of the bullet points I cut from Colin Roberts first was that one that gave me pause about inappropriate, I forget the exact language.
Publicity or,
Yeah, publicity.
Yeah.
So my comment on that is I'm okay with it. What I want to empower the board to do is reject sponsors for any reasonable reason. And I think I've seen weird conversations about like, oh, well, they're this kind of organization, so, we can't say no to them. So I think the line that Matt, you put in there, reserves the right to refuse any proposed sponsor, partner, exhibitor, or advertiser for any reason, gives them that power. So I'm okay with it. Colin, do you have a thought?
I mean, I would prefer to move that up, actually. Not have it be the last.
Sure. My question was about editing out the line about bad publicity, because it sort of means the same thing. If we think like, oh, this is just going to bring a shitstorm, then that language gives the board power to do that.
So I think I think the reason that O&A has it in there is for a debate point among the board, not necessarily, and it is a nebulous thing. It's not like there's no litmus test per se on how to define that. It's just a discussion that the board must have and say, if we take on this sponsor, will it have this effect? And what does that mean for our organization if it does? Are we going to lose members? Is there going to be some other repercussion? Are we going to end a partnership over this, which unfortunately SPJ has recently? And so, that is why it's a good thing to include. It's not a black and white rule necessarily. It's just a discussion that the board needs to have.
So my
but
question,
I'm willing to compromise but I also think that we've added, and I've shared this in the Slack, that this new draft has added some other loopholes that I would rather close as a compromise to drop the publicity angle.
Sure.
I hope that we could somehow communicate. Perhaps if we present some sort of a separate memo when we present this policy about the impact of publicity and SPJ in general.
What,
Joel, and then we'll go to Matt.
I wanted to ask Colin, what loopholes are you worried about that you feel need to be closed in this draft?
So I think there's a bunch of them, but can we go chronologically, Risa?
Yeah, let me hear from Matt, and then what we'll try to do, if everybody's okay with that, continue to work our way down either by paragraph or bullet point. Is that okay as a way of moving on so that we know what we are agreeing on? Matt, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest something to get at Colin's concern that sidesteps the language of inappropriate publicity, which I do think is subject to, one person's good publicity is another person's bad publicity, but gets at your point that we can give, this policy can give the board direction to consider the broader impact on the organization of any decision. I think if we can, rather than kind of create it in the negative, like don't embrace negative publicity, but consider whatever the language we decide on, three words, something like that, then that maybe accomplishes the same thing. I don't know.
Not to tarnish SPJ's credibility and image. I mean, that says,
which is in there,
pay attention to people that you're talking over contracts with, and ramifications of whether you sign that contract.
And I think it's okay, just to touch on Matt's point. I think it's actually okay to have the debate if someone thinks this will be negative publicity, but someone doesn't. I think that's okay then to have that argument, to have that discussion. Why do you think it's bad publicity? Why don't you?
And I think that line in what we have there in paragraph 2 encourages them to do that, because it says, okay, we don't want to do anything to tarnish. We certainly want to enhance. So let's look at liabilities versus benefits before we start pursuing people to be collaborators in whatever form.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that it's in there now. And yeah, I think it gets to that for sure.
Andy, did you have a hand up?
I did. I just, Larry, maybe you could tell us I understand the point of writing it in there so that it's top of mind, but if this were to pass before this, does anybody at HQ feel like that they had the leeway to reject somebody just because they didn't think they would be a good sponsor for whatever reason?
No, honestly, I think we've all felt in the past that, there was enough freedom that we could say, this is just not going to work for us. So I don't think we ever felt like we didn't have that power.
Okay.
Joel?
I just want to say, I think between the line that's there about, goal of the arrangements to enhance, not tarnish, and the escape clause, that's like the little sign over the door that says we reserve the right to refuse service. I really think Colin's concerns are addressed. And I think Matt and I still agree, specifically putting bad publicity in there is just not a good thing. I think the concepts are covered with the language that's there now.
Robert, what do you think?
Well, I do like it in, but I do think these two other things, again, the escape clause, I only wanted it in to give more power to the SPJ board and the staff to say, like, you know what, this is just going to rain chaos. So let's not do it. Like I said, I could live with that because of those two provisions. What about the people we haven't heard from? Maria?
Well, I guess I can go with the yes, by having tarnish, that I will assume that you don't want that, and that will bring that to the boards in their minds. But I see the point of why to have it more included in the policy. But I can go either way on those in that one.
Yeah. So Matt, I think your concern is that it's too wide. I don't think there's a lot of discussion about like, oh, is this gonna, at SPJ, everybody knows what bad publicity is. Nobody's gonna argue, oh, this is gonna look great. But I don't know. Do we have enough to move forward on? Or are we still debating?
I just have a thought about that, because I actually think there can be a situation where that happens. And one example is Gamergate, where in Region 3, they put together a panel looking at Gamergate and included a few controversial figures. And there are some people that thought that it's such an explosive topic, we don't even want to be connected to it. But in Region 3, they thought, here's an opportunity for people who are talking about some journalism principles around the fringes, and we could actually reach a different segment of people. There was a fundamental disagreement about that, and the people who objected, I think, would have considered it bad publicity.
Are we ready for paragraph 3 then?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'll put the cursor there in front. It's the lead into the bullet points. Do we need to? I'm sorry, Matt.
I was just saying, my changes here were actually additions rather than deletions from the original graph that Robert and Colin had, to include both media and non-media entities. I thought that after last week's discussion, it was good to specify that. Mm-hmm. And then I also wanted to include exhibitions and advertising, because again, to the vote that we took last week, it's not just the sponsorships, right? It's the exhibit hall at EIJ, and then it's also advertising. So I thought that's just the logic behind adding those after last week's discussion.
Yeah, I like it.
In view of maybe future Facebook and Google, should we not add the word collaborations in there, because that's a collaboration that we're offering these training programs? So that anything SPJ is doing, and it's not necessarily just relegated to the conference. I'm getting feedback from somebody.
I would just a comment here from Larry. I just want to make sure. I think, are we supposed to reserve our comments to just EIJ?
It was my understanding that our vote last week and in the minutes was that it applies to everything.
Okay.
Andy?
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to bring up, and I put this in the Slack channel and nobody responded to it. I know maybe that we think that maybe it's taking a step back, but I do actually think we should address it and have a position, and that is looking at the resolution itself. It says this is related to sponsorship policy. We have voted among ourselves what we think it's going to be, but are we worried that we're going to take this to the board or to the delegates and they'll say, well, why did you go beyond what we said? They're going to do all this other stuff. We just want sponsorship policy.
Yeah. So can I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
I think if we don't do that, we're going to be back here next year. It's all one thing. It's all one behavior. It's all a set of values. So I think we voted on it. And again, if we don't move forward, we're just going to keep going in circles. It's going to happen every year until there's no one left. So okay. I like that it's solid. And Marisa, I liked your the addition of collaborations. I'm sorry, I may have over-answered that question.
Let me go back. I'm having trouble reading my chicken scratch. Let me go back and actually see what I wrote for the minutes in Slack. Because I had partnerships, and then I changed it to convention, but then I said we want to encourage regional and chapter programs. So let me go back and see what I said.
I think those are two separate things. I think one was we didn't want to sort of have a blanket policy, but we wanted to set the standard. I think that's where that is.
Right.
And also, I think part of what we're responding to is we're saying this is our sponsorship as SPJ, and also when we enter into partnerships, with larger conventions, because some of the rationale that had been offered before by previous leadership was, oh, we don't have to abide by that. That's an SPJ policy. That's not an EIJ policy, which is the technical term bullshit. So we need to make that and carve that out and be emphatic about it.
Excuse me, Rob, there's some feedback or something coming in on your audio, and I will tell you that it's making my hearing aids make it sound like you're in a well.
Everybody else?
I hear that too. Yeah.
I'm not finding the minutes that I posted on here. Can somebody help me find where they are?
I was just looking at them before.
Yeah, I think you've got
My scroll down only goes down to see a little bit of what we've been doing.
I have it here. There's Monday.
Okay, can you please read it, Andy?
So what particular part you're looking at?
The part where we voted on whether it was applying to all partnerships.
Okay, let me just scan this for a moment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The motion also included a provision. But I'm sorry. Hall moved and Helder seconded a motion that SPJ agree to accept media and non-media sponsorships for the national conference as long as sponsors abide by criteria that will be added to the specifics of the policy. The motion also included a provision that would encourage those planning regional and chapter programs to abide by those criteria for their conferences and programs, but the policy would not require it at the regional and local levels. Is that it?
But
Yes.
I think she's interested in the line under that.
After lengthy discussion about whether SPJ should adopt a policy that applies to all sponsorships and partnerships with individual companies or other journalism organizations, Elder moved that sponsorships and partnerships be yoked in the policy. I remember the word yoked, because SPJ should be consistent in its dealings with other organizations. Second, and it passed 4-3.
And I would just say, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I still am on the other side of that decision, but I firmly think that we took a vote on this last week and that we're revisiting ground we don't need to revisit. We made a decision. Let's move on. We've decided to yoke them. You know
Well,
what I mean?
I just wanted to make sure that the wording doesn't just deal with sponsorships and the trade show, that we do have, that it's supposed to be all encompassing.
Right. And I will say to that end, I'm not sure that collaborations is the most precise word. I mean, we're all collaborating now. Like,
Please suggest a better one.
We have partnerships.
Hang on a second.
but it's in that sentence, yeah.
I missed the last week's discussion, and I don't see partnerships
Oh, yeah, there it is.
as being the exhibitions per se. Like I never thought of this policy as applying to the job fair element.
Well, you know, Larry, maybe you can explain, but if you're buying space at the expo, that makes you a sponsor, right?
No.
Yeah, there's two separate levels. Either you're a sponsor or you're an expo person. They're considered separate.
Yeah.
Sponsor or what?
Expos and sponsors are considered separate things.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole packet that Larry's team and the contracted development person presents to people of the different levels, and there's a clear separation of the sponsorship levels and the job fair expo exhibitors. So I don't. To me that gets a little bit more. That's a little bit more murky.
Well, again, not to shut off discussion, but that's already been voted on. So I put in the word partnerships because what we do for one is done for all, Kant's categorical imperative. So let's make sure that the language reflects that. So I added sponsorships to partnerships instead of collaboration. I don't know if the feedback is me or what. It's going to drive me nuts.
I guess it's the exhibitions that's bogging me down. Where did that come from?
I included that, and the reason is because there have been times, Sinclair, for example, if they have space in an exhibit hall, I think that's part of this. I think based on last week's discussion where we were saying that we're all in on everything, this is a kind of an all-inclusive policy, that we have to include the exhibit hall, because if you say Fox can't sponsor a panel, but Fox can put their name on a bag or be an exhibit hall, and Sinclair can do the same, and Coke can do, like once you start going down those lists that some people find fault with, I think it needs to apply to every potential avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. You know, the having Sinclair's name on the bag or Fox News's name on the bag is separate from them being just an organization that's hiring. I mean, a lot of people that work for Fox News are SPJ members too. I mean, and it's not like, you know, that's a really like more. I think to Andy's point, if we present that to the board and the membership, they might just not accept this policy as a whole.
Or they can offer a friendly amendment from the floor. But as I said, there was already a vote on that. So if there's something else that needs to be included, what else do we have on paragraph 3?
Well, but I do think
I was absent for the vote, so I mean,
if the
I
group
know,
doesn't want
and I'm sorry, but your haircut that you got on the cruise looks great.
is the will of the task force to include exhibitions then, or to exclude it?
I mean, I don't read was exhibitions? I just read partnerships. I don't want those two together.
Well, sponsorship includes exhibitions.
Well, that was my question.
No,
We can take exhibitions out, but that includes, that's covered under sponsorships.
But that was my question to Larry. He said they're two different things. He said there's sponsorships and then there's expo.
Yeah, they're different arrangements.
Yeah, that's correct.
So under the current wording, the expo is not included.
Well, no, the current wording includes exhibitions, which is.
So it is.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it says sponsorships, partnerships, exhibitions, and advertising from both media and non-media entities.
Yeah. And we said we now have partnerships in there twice, however. See?
Okay, then sorry about that.
Sorry.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we change it to that?
Cut out one of them.
Well, but I think you need that.
The partnerships are the agreements that we enter into with other journalism organizations and media and non-media company.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And then those with whom we enter into are individuals, corporations, foundations, or other entities.
Yeah, that's true.
Quickly, are we still getting feedback? I don't hear feedback at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of feedback.
I hear it. Yeah.
Your audio is very distorted, Robert. I'm not sure why.
Okay, I'm gonna try to call in on my cell phone. So give me a moment, or just keep going.
So on exhibitions, do we include or exclude that?
Could we take a vote on just that word? I think just that word is troublesome.
I do too.
Which word?
Exhibitions.
But so just one of the things, and I'm not sold either way. I think frankly, it might be easier or better to not address exhibitions, to not apply restrictions to exhibitions. But I'm just thinking of membership. To Robert's point, if someone is upset that, I'm not going to use names, that sponsor X, you know, we're picking up a bag, we're going to say you can't sponsor a panel, but then they have a quarter of the exhibition hall. Isn't that the same thing? I just don't understand where we draw the line. Isn't that the same thing?
So I think, well, Larry can chime in more, but like if you buy, so last year Fox News was like a gold, or like it was a gold sponsor. They paid $50,000, and they, with that sponsorship, they were given the name on the bag and a certain amount of square footage in the exhibition hall. So if they were not a sponsor, they could still have an exhibition, but they would by default be limited in space because they wouldn't have that sponsorship level. You know what I'm saying? Like that sponsorship level that provides them more space.
Well, I thought that controversy was what got us to this point, is that we were concerned about people who were in the trade show and also people who had things in the goodie bags, whose names were on the bags. I mean, I thought that's what we were here for.
No,
that exhibitions were a rub.
it wasn't just the exhibitions, the expo. It was the things beyond the expo that was the problem.
But
The
I would
expo
argue,
was included.
to Robert's point, that this is, we should look at this holistically. If someone sponsors a panel, it could be that 30 people see it. If someone sponsors an exhibit hall, literally everyone at the conference goes to the exhibit hall. So that's, you're talking thousands of people. The footprint is much bigger, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back and say, I think that was already voted on, that Kant's categorical imperative, what applies to one applies to all in any situation in which SPJ is affiliated in any fashion with a party outside of SPJ. So I think exhibitions were covered in the intent of the vote last week, which was 4-3. So let's say that issue has already been voted on, and let's look at the bullet points. Yeah. Unless someone can show me where my interpretation is in error of the vote last week.
Well, I guess, I think, Narisa, you're right, but I guess the question is there anybody who voted in favor, any of the four, who upon hearing that the expo is included, makes them want to change their vote?
I'm not sure I understand. What exactly is your question? You mean change the vote to oppose linking them because exhibitions is too broad? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Does that change?
So even
to do that?
Based on the questions that I've been hearing just now, it seems that there isn't a clear understanding of how they're different. So I don't think the vote was based on the right information. And so, like sponsorships and having a position in the job expo are not the same.
Yeah. So
are you saying you'd be okay with one but not the other, Colin?
Yeah, I think the job fair component should be treated separately. That's my personal feeling. I don't think that we should have a sponsor that's not in line with our policy. And a sponsor is a brand that is pushed out there separately from the job fair.
But somebody hiring on behalf of that organization would be okay with you?
Excuse me, point of order. There's an exchange of money for the job fair, correct, Larry? To participate in the job fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, the vote was anything touching on matters of money. So I think this point was covered in the vote last week. Robert.
So I expressed this last time we met because I think we want to make this about behavior. And again, I think there's a difference between, the anger that people had over Fox News being on the bag and the large pile of discarded bags that we had, and the Fox affiliates, which are people who do local news. I think those are sort of separate considerations. And so I am just sort of asking an open question in how we deal with that in this policy. I think it is dealt with in behavior. But I think, again, keeping Sinclair and Fox and those folks in the tent because they have local news stations that do good local news, how we might address that.
But what if it is Fox News that has a booth set up at EIJ, we are hiring, not for our affiliates, for Fox News. Is that problematic?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Go ahead, Joel.
I would like to just see us leave it with the vote last week that included everything, and not, spend more time trying to pick and choose between the levels of participation. I think that I agree with you. I think we covered that, and I think we're arguing into a cul-de-sac here.
And I second Joel.
I agree. And I agree. And I would just add, I think it's up to the board to explain that the policy, we have voted that the policy should apply to everyone. I think that's what we voted. And I think it's on the board and the board members to be able to explain, if they allow Fox affiliates in there, that Fox affiliates are not Fox News, that they're different. And that if we allow Sinclair in, that we're allowing Sinclair in because they hired and employ thousands of our members. So as we talked about with the verbs like tarnish and the escape clause that allows us to revoke anyone's potential financial transaction.
I think we're covered.
This language is good.
Yeah.
I think.
And a selfish point of order, did we get rid of feedback?
Yes.
Yes, we did. Thank you. Welcome back from the Twilight Zone.
Perfect.
Thanks, Robert.
I'm sorry, that was me. Sorry.
It's okay. Bad connections happen. Okay, so let's look at bullet point 1, please. Any discussion there?
I like it.
What is that? I mean, I get the words there, but what's that addressing?
I think it's a catch-all for anything illegal.
We can't be paid in poker chips.
Or laundered money.
Yeah, something like that. Embezzled money or.
Okay. Can I make a small editing comment before that? The lead into that, we're saying sponsorships, etc., will be accepted by individuals. It makes it sound like the individual is accepting the sponsorship. Is that what we mean? Or don't we want it that we are accepting it?
No, I think your semantics are off on there, Andy. The meaning is that we can accept that from individuals, corporations, foundations, or other entities, so long as they can.
Right. That was my question. Thank you.
And we got serial commas in there, and we don't have them up elsewhere. FYI.
Yeah.
Can you say where, Colin?
No Oxford commas.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, any other comments
Just
on?
consistency, that's all.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just wasn't seeing it. That's why I was trying to get you to direct me to it. Any other comments on bullet point 1? Okay, bullet point 2.
I like it.
Okay, hearing no discussion, bullet point 3.
Just hold for a second because I'm still processing.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm taking the periods out because these aren't sentences. Don't mind me.
What's with the end that does not properly investigate claims of discrimination or harassment? What is that?
That's right from the O&A policy.
Okay, but what does it mean? Why do we want that? What's our purpose there?
Well, I put, it wasn't in the first version. I put it in there because it was in the O&A version. My thinking was it allows us to tell, not to pick on a particular outlet, NBC News, whatever, any of these Me Too organizations, that we don't want to partner with them because they didn't handle some allegation correctly.
If we have diversity in there, Andy, wouldn't you agree that it would make sense to include this too? I mean, both of them are a little bit off the main narrow mission of SPJ in terms of news gathering and First Amendment, but they have to do with sort of best practices of news organizations.
I'm not sure that I'm agreeing that this is on the same plane. Diversity is a concept and we support that. does not properly investigate claims of discrimination. I mean, like, how are we even party to these things? How do we know what's going on?
As a woman of color, I can tell you exactly how news organizations can be party to this. The discrimination, the harassment is horrific.
No, you're misunderstanding my question. How is SPJ a party to a claim of discrimination at?
I don't think it's saying that SPJ would be a party to the
No.
investigation.
All right, bad word. How are we aware? How do we even know any of this is happening? Like, why? What? I mean, we're going to start. I don't.
Hopefully, some reporters covered it.
Yeah, Andy, we would know about it because it's been reported. I don't think any of us are suggesting that we become, like a shadow HR department and look into the organizations. But if there's been news reporting about, I mean, let's say, I hate to keep going back to Fox, but Fox and Roger Ailes and Megyn Kelly and Bill O'Reilly and all that kind of stuff, that's what we're talking about. People who have become prominent, or not people, but entities that have become prominent by virtue of their documented misconduct or persuasively alleged misconduct, we would walk away from them. And that goes back to the tarnishing our image thing up top.
Yeah,
it's just they're bad actors that we don't want to embrace, even if they're in our business. They're conducting themselves badly.
I mean, NBC.
Yeah.
What is
that sums up my thinking very well.
PBS.
What is properly investigating a claim? That's a highly subjective thing.
Oh, for the love of God, Matt Lauer. NBC knew that Matt Lauer was a bad actor and didn't investigate.
Charlie Rose.
Charlie Rose, Les Moonves.
I mean, come on. There are lots of cases.
So just to second what Matt was saying, and this is just a signal about who we do and don't want to do business with. I think Joel said it as well. It does no harm here, and it just says this is part of our core values, and we recognize this needs to change.
Right. Me too. Right.
I think that the O&A policy actually has it as a separate bullet. Was there a reason that we didn't want to do that here too?
We could do it as a separate bullet. I don't recall. It might have been an editing thing I did. If they have it as separate, I'm happy to emphasize that fact. I think it's that important. Do you have a link to that? We can just go back and see.
Let me get it. Yeah.
Does adding the words against, or let's see, claims of discrimination, harassment against the said funder, does that clarify or just make it worse?
I think it's just a murky.
Yeah,
Says,
I think it's unnecessary, Narissa.
They have it, any funder and or a separate bullet, start bullet, any funder and or closely affiliated business who do not properly investigate claims of discrimination or harassment.
I'm fine with that.
Oh, yeah, I think the reason why, I see now why, because they have affiliated entity in one bullet point and closely affiliated business. It seems like we might partner with groups that aren't technically businesses, but this plank should still apply to them. So it seemed entity was a better noun, and closely affiliated seems like an adverb we didn't need. Closely.
So now we're not just talking about, whatever company.
Can we just say with the following? Can we change funds or funder to entities? Because we've earlier said individuals, corporations, foundations, or other entities.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I like that too.
I understand Andy's objection, but I think it's important for us to signal again what we stand for. Yeah. And can I suggest we move on from this?
How does this look?
Okay.
That.
And then do that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
A little better. So it's because it's now you're talking about a concept instead of, well, I don't know. I don't love it, but I'm just one. So go ahead.
All right, so we did some breaking apart there. Are we good with bullet point 1? Bullet point 2? Bullet point 3. Bullet point 4. Okay, hearing none. I'm sorry.
One small thing, Teresa.
Robert?
Did we lose a tax against journalists in here?
Well, we have engages in disinformation or propaganda campaigns against journalism or journalists. Does that cover it, Robert?
No, because again, Charles Koch Foundation just attacked journalists, took out ads against journalists.
What about bullet point 2 where it says acts against journalism, journalists, or freedom of expression?
That's it.
Doesn't that cover it? Acts against?
Attacks.
We didn't have a tax in there before, Robert.
I think acts is a little more general. Attacks is narrower. I mean, I think acts gives us more leeway to, criticize behavior that's directed against journalists.
Yeah, like the Fed's wiretapping. That wasn't an outright in-your-face attack, but that certainly was acts against journalism and journalists.
I like acts against.
I'm looking to see what I had before.
And we've got a president who will make really awful comments about us, and he'll say, "Oh, but he's not attacking people."
Mm-hmm.
It seems like attack can be subjective, where acts is
Yeah.
literally any action that you take that we deem
Right.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, didn't the Koch outfit defend what they did against Jane Mayer by saying, hey, they were just actively promoting their viewpoint and protecting themselves against defamation? And we all construed that as an absolute attack. But that's sort of in the eye of the beholder. I think acts is better. I really do.
Yeah.
Can I go back to point 3? And I'm not arguing the substance, just the syntax. Any entity that does not properly investigate claims of discrimination or harassment, that's actually written in a very broad way. It's like you don't investigate a harassment, claim in your community. You're a bad news organization. You had nothing to do with it, but you didn't investigate it. I think you just need to make clear that it's in which it's alleged against the entity, right?
Claims by their employees of discrimination or harassment. I mean, that's what you mean.
I think.
Well, what about contractors or?
Yeah, there's lots of
Made against the entity.
Properly sort of
bots.
covers it.
I made a slight edit there on number 3. Does that help your concern, Andy?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so are we finished with the 4 bullet points? Or are we ready to go to the next paragraph? Please speak up.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it made against the entity or an individual? I mean,
Yeah.
I
think it was fine as it was, because then it can be all of the above. The entity itself.
No, but
because I think
Or the CEO.
But it's well, no. But what you're ignoring is that the way it's written, it could be claims of discrimination or harassment that have nothing to do with the entity. It's not pointing out which claims we're talking about.
No, but Andy, when it says made against the entity, doesn't that address what you were?
Yeah, no, I'm arguing that's correct.
Yeah.
Against Matt's idea of that it's not needed.
Oh, yeah.
I
think it's needed. It clarifies.
Right.
But what if the claim is made against an individual?
Yeah.
That would be included. I mean,
an individual, the entities that we're looking at are in that paragraph above before the bullet points. That would be individuals, corporations, foundations, or other entities with the following limitations.
That involves the entity?
Well, Bill O'Reilly or Roger Ailes, for instance. I mean, ultimately, Fox was liable for their conduct.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that involves the entity?
You're not claiming you were harassed by Fox. You're claiming.
Well, how about this? Fox is ultimately liable. I mean, you may be harassed by someone who works for Fox, but ultimately Fox is going to have to answer if they're signing the paychecks.
Does that work instead of made against involving? Because then it would include
Yeah.
people affiliated with it.
Right.
All right, so all 4 bullet points with those edits. Is it okay to go on to the next paragraph that says sponsors may propose? We'll give folks a few seconds to read that over.
Yeah, and this was Colin's point, so maybe he wants to start the conversation.
I mean, I don't love it, but you know, if everyone else is okay with it,
I oppose it.
Yeah, I oppose it as well. I
This
think
is-
there's no difference between proposing and selecting here. So, and this is going to cause a huge furor. We should not have it in.
This was one of the, well, yeah, this
oh
was,
yeah. Sorry, I thought we were still talking about the bullets. It's
Just so I understand, you mean that they're members of the task force are objecting to allowing sponsors to propose but not select? We don't think they should have any role. Is that correct?
right.
Yep.
That it's a
yeah. I don't think we should give them an out at all on that. And I think it creates, if we say that they could propose explicitly like we are here, it creates an issue for the board as well, and for Larry and his team.
Well, so just to kind of explore this, I'm in favor of a wall between the money and the content of the program. But let's just use the Koch Foundation sponsorship. They sponsored an FOI panel. And that went, haywire because they were not supposed to be choosing people, but they were. But if they say we want to contribute $25,000 so that you can have an FOI panel, that's kind of a hard wall to me, but does that fit here under program content where we would then be allowing them to choose program content?
No, it would ban it.
No, but okay, so they can never say we want you to hold an FOI panel.
Not with that policy.
Okay, that's just all I'm exploring.
And so my thought was, I don't want to jump on anyone's conversation. This is in many ways, this is at the heart of it, I think. I think, again, it comes down to trust for the board, and maybe if people don't have trust for the board, and so this is a non-starter. But I do think that tying our hands like this is something we should think about. It's one thing to say, as Andy just used the example, I am from Poynter and I'll give you $25,000 to have a FOIA panel. We can't do that now. And this is a time when we, need to balance the ethical guidance of this policy with the fundamental financial realities of having a convention. And I'm not, at this point, wed to one side or the other. I also kind of think there's some wisdom in having a firm wall. But I just think, in reality, is anyone going to give money if they don't even have an ability to say, hey, would you consider a FOIA panel? Like, why would someone give you $25,000?
So what if we put the fence, what if we lift up the fence and pull in the topic idea onto our side and then put the fence back down? Sponsors may propose a program topic, period.
Let's hear from Joel, please.
Yeah, I forgive me if I'm repeating something that I mentioned in the last conversation. I don't think I did, but somebody stop me if I did. I've gone to some of the Atlantic seminars that they've had, like all-day discussions on, say, a water or infrastructure, something like that. And they incorporate something in the program that's called a sponsored panel that is separate in a box, highlighted as different than their own completely independent generated content. And they label clearly, a sponsor is paying for this one. And they've even gone so far as to have somebody from the sponsor, like as the moderator. And the programs that I heard were not in any way promoting the product. In other words, they didn't steer the conversation around to talking about their service or their product. If you hadn't seen that labeling, it would have sounded like any other panel on that particular subject. But because of the financial arrangement, Atlantic accepted the money, but also flagged in neon the fact that somebody is paying for this and that they have more active participation in it. Now, I'm not advocating necessarily that SPJ or EIJ adopt that model. The reason I mention it here is because that was their way of addressing Matt's issue about not wanting to turn away money, but at the same time, protecting themselves by being transparent and letting everybody know with no false pretenses that there was engagement by a sponsor here. And it goes without saying, this was not a sponsor anybody would have objected to that was politically problematic or anything. I think it was like a bottled water company or something like that. Nobody that had any objectionable behavior toward journalists.
Okay, excuse me, I'm not sure who had a hand up first, Becky or Robert, but one of you, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, each AMC does exactly the same thing. And it's interesting how many people will refuse to go to those specially highlighted sessions because, you know, they tend to be textbooks or something like that, and they just don't want to, you know, feel the pressure because they feel like there's an immediate pressure from the sponsor to get them to buy whatever.
Okay, Robert.
Well, I think this comes from what Matt talked about before, alluded to before, is just the erosion in trust. And so I think if we can say, hey, we're not going to accept these type of sponsorships based on behavior, then this other kind of sponsorship is more palatable. If, you know, somebody comes in, you know, a chamber of commerce or whatever it is and says, okay, we want to sponsor a FOIA panel, great. I think the objection came in is when you had the Charles Koch Foundation purchasing access to journalists. And then I had people say like, well, you know, what's the big deal? You know, like they trained a bunch of journalists, you know, they're doing good things. And I had to point out to them, that is a purchased opinion. You now have a positive opinion of an entity that has attacked journalists. So I think if we have this other, you know, strong umbrella policy about who we will and will not accept money for, then at the convention level, there might be more acceptance of this sponsored panel if we're transparent about it.
I'll make an OG comment here, old gal comment. I think historically, anyone has been able to propose a program. Certainly, those calls come out in leads, and they are also posted on SPJ's website. So it's not as though the program topic selection is being done by very few. It's an open public clarion call. And then also historically, SPJ has never paid speaking fees, has never paid expenses. The point is, you come on your own dime. Sometimes we lose good speakers as a result of that because they can't afford to come without some assistance. So this is basically stating, is my understanding, what has historically been the practice before, and making sure that those from the outside looking in, if that's included, would assure them that there is a wall there. So that's for what it's worth. Matt?
I'm so sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to ask Larry if he could quickly explain to us what the policy is, because it's my understanding that we do pretty prominently say sponsored panel in our advertising and in the sign out in front of a room.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say, is because Matt and I are also on the program committee too. So to what Narissa said, we are definitely wide open with letting people bring in there. But yeah, we do make sure that people know that, you know, sponsors, the few that we've had recently, are highlighted in the programs. So I mean, so my question would be like, if we have, you know, because we've had sessions with Google with our program with them. You know, would this, for some reason, be a problem with this policy?
Well, see, NEFI, hey, Larry, NEFI always sponsors the Best in Business Journalism panel, don't they?
Yeah, and I forget the the program is, but yes, they do sponsor something. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've gone to the NEFI one a couple of times. They give out awards during that time. It's a financial reporting organization.
Yeah.
Well, in the interest of trying to get a consensus around this end, would people accept a change that said sponsors may propose program subjects, but not select panelists or speakers, but not panelists or speakers? Something like this.
I like that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to speak
I
to
can
the,
certainly live with that.
yeah, I wanted to speak to the overall just credibility and where this came from. Again, I think if we say we don't want these type of sponsors based on behavior, once that is weeded out, then this is a secondary concern. I think that's where historically this is coming from.
Can we change subjects to ideas or not?
That's fine.
Okay.
Topics?
I like that better. I think one of the problems that we had with the Koch panel is that there wasn't a full disclosure, there wasn't full transparency there on why on the selection of the panelists, which it turned out was heavily involving Koch and their input on those panels.
Well, and I mean, it was even worse because we got an explanation from National that turned out to be incorrect. It actually concealed the relationship.
I think it's been problematic for us, and I would like us to do some damage control on that. I also don't, you know, if Coca-Cola wanted to sponsor a panel, and they had an idea, I think that would be okay. But you know, it becomes a case-by-case situation. But I think the way that this is revised here is good.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this paragraph sponsors may propose at all?
Well, I don't think we've talked about speaking fees or cover expenses.
Okay, go ahead. Anyone?
So,
I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward.
My loophole, this is another loophole for me as far as if, you know, sponsorship funds would indirectly pay for the expenses tied to any of the proposals they might have. But if we get around them having too much say on what's proposed, you know, as far, you know, I get travel expenses and things like that for, I mean, we do it in New York sometimes. We paid for the hotel room for our dinner speaker or whatever. But, you know, I just don't want it to be, I don't want it to be a loophole. That's all. I just want it to be clear.
Colin, I mean, if you take away the sponsorship angle, and if you say SPJ, we don't provide speaking fees either. So it's not a loophole.
I mean, how many of us have paid our own way to National or to EIJ to speak? And, you know, we went knowing that this was our dime, that we weren't going to be reimbursed. Nobody was going to pay it for us.
I think that we have given speakers like the day, you know, a comp day, they can wander around the conference the day they're there.
That is correct, yes.
So I have a history question, and that is, why is paying speaker fees considered unethical in this context? Because if we're paying somebody for their time, I just need some history, please.
I don't think it's unethical, Rob. I think that it's cost prohibitive. When you start talking about the sheer number of people who are there and speaking, then, you know, that becomes very expensive if we start paying everybody, you know, an honorarium for being there to speak. I mean, I've been on plenty of panels with only 2 of us and many panels with 4 of us. And, you know, start multiplying that out, that's a lot of money.
Bill?
But this,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Rob.
but this has to do with sponsorships, not necessarily, like, so they were saying, if we get, and again, let's pick a big innocuous sponsor, Coca-Cola wants to bring somebody interesting, then what is our objection to that, as long as it's not a pro Coca-Cola rally?
The point is, as it has been explained to me historically, I maybe have a wrong interpretation, is if you're being asked to speak, it's part of your service to journalism that you are going to, your company will pay to send you, or you are going to do it on your own dime. That SPJ will not pay to have you come.
Yeah.
Joel?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I understand Robert's question and the concerns, I don't think the issue is not just speakers getting fees, but the idea that if a sponsor is paying their fees, then there's a conflict of interest somehow, that they're going to be like shills for the sponsor, or that their opinions are not going to be, independently derived. It's not the issue of us paying their speaking fees. It's essentially Coca-Cola, hiring somebody to come out and be on a panel. Is that it?
Yeah. And I think that's what this is trying to address.
It just looks bad. It's not that it looks bad if we pay, although Becky's, obvious point about it being cost prohibitive. Sure, we would prefer, that people agree to appear without honoraria, but if the sponsor directly pays the honoraria, then there's an appearance of a conflict that you can't really address, because it's an appearance, and you can't, if it looks bad to people, you're not going to convince them that it shouldn't look bad.
Narissa, can I speak real quick? This is Larry.
Yeah.
Just a real quick thing. So I know even up until last year, and of course I've only been through 2 EIJs, but we didn't even pay for the expenses of our fellows. So last year the foundation covered the cost of that. The foundation, and again, I know SPJ Foundation is probably different than a outside sponsor, but we had a minority media panel that came in, and of course there was not necessarily funding for them to come in on their own dime, so we paid for those things. And I get lots of emails every day from some speakers bureaus saying, oh my gosh, we have this great speaker, which usually is totally unrelated to journalism. But I always say we don't pay our speakers, and then I never hear from them again, which is nice, actually.
Yeah.
So we're putting ourselves into a bind by including this line. Then SPJ may choose.
But the existing policy does give the board the ability to pay if they choose to.
Yeah, but this policy is only dealing with sponsors. So I think we can take this out, because SPJ gets to exercise that prerogative anyway. We just don't want sponsors coming in and buying panels, right?
Well, my thinking was this is going to take the place of the existing EIJ sponsorship policy, which is going to go away. So then we're going to have no record. We're going to have a policy that says sponsors can't give speaker fees, and then we'll be silent on whether the SPJ board can. I think the default assumption would be that SPJ cannot, because we don't allow our sponsors, or at least there will be confusion or muddy waters. And so I think we should, in this policy, say whether that's allowed or not, just kind of clarity going forward.
I mean, you make a good point that some guidance is going away, but it never should have been. I mean, before it may have been an EIJ policy, and now we're creating a sponsorship policy, and they're not the same. And so this falls by the wayside. Well, then let's just realize that we need to have some type of policy for bringing in our speakers ourselves, nothing to do with sponsors. That can be enshrined somewhere else in a policy.
Doesn't it
I think also
a sponsorship issue.
Just really quick, I think also our current sponsorship policy is actually a joint sponsorship policy with RTDNA. And they might they have, well, I don't want to.
Colin,
that's probably some of the history there.
Colin, that ends with the Washington conference. And so if this is adopted, this policy will take precedent when we approach other organizations to join with us in the future.
And
we're in the last year of that shared sponsorship policy with RTDNA.
But there is,
so if we have the opportunity, I would say to eliminate it.
Well,
Okay, hold on a second. Robert and then Andy.
I was just going to embrace the momentum we have because I think we're at 2 hours now, and just say it makes sense to adopt it this way. I am for any policy that is transparent and it brings us strong speakers and doesn't let sponsors choose speakers. I think Matt has laid out a pretty clear roadmap here, and I understand his reasons for including it. But I just wanted to see if we can move beyond it or if we needed to talk more about it, because I think he's laid out a smart policy.
Okay, Andy.
yeah, I just want to say that the RTDNA is no longer committed to being our partner, but it does not mean that they are committed to not being our partner. They still haven't decided.
Right.
We had some flux, some staffing turmoil. They were kind of standing back and seeing what happens. They may decide that they want to join up with us again. And if they do, and I mentioned this before, there were, I think, 2 different points that they wanted in a sponsorship policy, and the SPJ board didn't like it, but RTDNA said, tough, we walk away if you don't change it, and so we caved. And this is one of them. So they want to pay speaker fees. We did not.
Yeah.
Just pointing that out, that we could create a wedge if we decide it's never going to happen, and they say it has to, and then they say, all right, forget it, we can't work together.
We recognize that organizations may not want to partner with us with this sponsorship policy if this gets approved by the delegates. So Joel, and then we'll move on.
Just a very quick question. I'm not sure I quite understand Andy's point. Forgive me, Andy, but what was the RTDNA objection on the speaking fees issue that would cause the rift between our groups?
There were representatives from both groups that got together and created a policy that was an EIJ policy. And this is when the whole thing blew up, and, Alex is saying, oh, we don't have a policy, which kind of was disingenuous, but, then we created one. And so the representatives got together, hammered out something, and took them to each of their respective boards. Well, RTDNA got everything it wanted. SPJ was not really happy with 2 of those points. Our board voted to change that compromise to remove this, and I forget what the other clause was, and then took it back to the small groups, and that was just a non-starter. And said, nope, we already worked it out. And so the SPJ board had to vote again. Do you insist that be there, or do you cave so that we can have this partnership? And the board,
what was the precise point of disagreement?
Paying speaker fees was one of them. They wanted it, we didn't.
Wait, so just so I understand, they wanted to allow their sponsors to pay speaking fees, or it wasn't RTDNA paying the fees, it was their sponsors paying the fees?
I believe it was the sponsors, right?
What was the second point?
Okay, Robert.
Yeah, I still, so Andy and Joel's line of questioning is exactly what I wanted to know. I just didn't know the background. So RTDNA, they wanted their sponsors to pay for speaking fees. That was one point of contention. What's the second point?
I'd have to look it up. I wrote about both of them, and I might be able to find it quickly while we're talking, but I don't know it offhand.
Well, can we get back to our policy then? Because like I say, if they don't want to come on board with us, that'll be their option. We'll pursue, SPJ reserves the right to pursue partnerships with other media organizations. So the paragraph that is in gray, what's the consensus of the group? Are we keeping that or getting rid of it? Because that opens the door for SPJ to pay speaking fees.
I think it's fine because it allows SPJ to decide if they want to pay for, let's say, Lester Holt coming in.
Agreed.
Okay.
I just don't, the top it says SPJ sponsorship policy. It has nothing to do with sponsorship.
Other comments?
I sort of agree with Andy there. It's speakers and sponsors are, not the same.
So, but again, my thinking is that it piggybacks on a line about sponsors, and then we'll be silent on what SPJ can do. So it seems to me kind of a natural place to put that.
Can we make it one paragraph and then it's clear?
Like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, other comments? Maria, we don't want to leave you out.
No, looks good.
Okay, so everybody is fine.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Yes, we can hear you, Maria.
Okay, good.
Okay, other comments on that? I think, if I understand correctly, Matt was trying to put that in there as an additional layer of transparency that reserves SPJ's prerogative but makes it clear that sponsors it's a no-no. Am I correct, Matt?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on that?
And so the designee,
Oh, yeah.
well, that to me is also a nebulous thing. I don't really know what that is or how that's defined. Is there a way to remove that?
Yeah, my thinking was,
Why don't we just say the SPJ board?
Yep. Simple.
Oh, yeah.
Because ultimately they are the ones who need to answer. If they turn that authority over to somebody else, ultimately the board still has to answer for it.
do we need full responsibility or is that redundant?
I think responsibility. Okay.
97% responsibility.
That's better.
Anything else on that paragraph? Okay, next paragraph. This means that our executive director needs to review everything.
So why is this here, Matt?
I just put it again for a layer of transparency and a layer of kind of hierarchy. I think it makes sense if we're talking money that the professional who deals with money rather than the non-volunteers who are committing their time and passion but may not have the level of financial savvy that the ED has as a professional. And I ran it by John and he said he didn't have any problems with it.
So it doesn't give the executive director authority over approving it. It just says review before.
Right.
So
The
that,
responsibility is still the board, as we just laid out.
yeah, so that if there is a concern, the SPJ executive director needs to make that known before a contract is signed.
Yeah, my thought was this then gives us 10 set of eyeballs who must look at it and raise a potential red flag about tarnishing the reputation or any of this. Without that, then the ED could say, well, no, it wasn't. It was your responsibility. Not that our ED would, but you never know.
Yes, Andy.
I found the two different sections that were the source of our disagreement. One was, as I said, about sponsor money. What the SPJ policy said was sponsor or grant money will not be used to pay speakers. And what the final version was, because RTDNA wanted it, was SPJ, RTDNA, or the EIJ Planning Committee may choose in certain circumstances to use sponsor or grant monies to provide fees to speakers. That was one point. The second point was on control by sponsors. Our version said that when sponsors propose session ideas and speakers, those proposals, quote, can be rejected. RTDNA objected to that, so can be rejected was removed.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
That does give us a little broader picture there. Any objections to SPJ's executive director will review each contract?
No.
Nope.
Okay. SPJ reserves the right to refuse. Please take a few seconds and review that graph, please.
And Nerissa, we are, again, we're recording this for anybody who wants to watch it. Maybe we should say it out loud.
Okay.
I realize this is too little too late, but.
Okay.
God bless their hearts, whoever's lasted this long. Jeez.
Yeah, thank God have mercy on their souls. SPJ reserves, the previous paragraph, SPJ's executive director will review each contract before it is accepted. Hearing no objection, SPJ reserves the right to refuse any proposed sponsor, partner, exhibitor, or advertiser for any reason is the sentence being considered now.
It's good.
That's good.
Any objections? Okay. The next paragraph is this policy applies to national SPJ events, whether SPJ is a sole sponsor or a co-sponsor. Local and regional SPJ chapters will be encouraged but not required to apply it to their conferences and programs, which was part of the vote from one of the items voted on last week. Discussions, edits to that paragraph?
I think it's good.
All right. Do we want to vote now, or do we want to let this percolate for a week and then come back and put fresh eyes on it? Because I don't know about y'all, but my eyes are worn out. And the rest of me is too. And that way, look at it again. Or do we want to circulate this in some other fashion, maybe in a Word doc and attachment, so that we don't have some of this other visual noise? How do you want to proceed, task force?
I wouldn't mind. I would not mind voting today, but I can wait another week if that's what we decide.
Okay, Joel?
I would like to vote today. I'm comfortable voting today. I think we've thrashed it out.
Yeah.
Robert? Matt?
I agree. Let's vote.
Wake up, Andy. Okay, are we done? Are we done editing, or would the task force consider minor copy edits a revision to the policy requiring a separate vote? Because I'm going to go over it with copy as a copy editor one more time, just to make sure that what we send does agree with AP style, punctuation, spelling, and grammar.
Can we trust you?
Well, I tell you. How about this? Whatever I send to Patty, you all will be copied on. How's that?
That's great.
Okay. All right. Would someone please like to put that in the form of a motion? Do we?
I will so
this
move.
policy?
I have a quick question though, and it's for
Okay.
Matt.
We have a. Can we do a motion in a second and then have discussion?
I second it.
Okay. So Becky moved. Maria seconded. Okay. Andy, you have a question?
I did. It's for Matt. Matt, since the minority felt was opposed to linking together or yoking, but the majority vote carried the day, and so that's what our draft policy says. Do you feel comfortable voting in favor of this overall policy despite being opposed to that one section?
Yes.
Well, that's decisive.
Okay. Any other discussion on what is in front of us?
I mean, I'm in the, I always like to put fresh eyes on something that's been, minced through like this. I prefer to give it a, put it in a new doc and give it another look and vote. That's my personal thought.
Okay. Other discussion?
I'll second what, it's not a motion, but I think I agree with Tom.
All right.
Well,
Other discussion?
I'm fine with waiting too, if that's what a few others are saying. I do think this brings us to the end of our work, our task, once we approve this. And so I would just say that if we do meet again, that not only do we vote to approve this policy, but that we ask to be brought back into the process at the end. As at the beginning of this conversation, if we talked about this is going to be sent to the board, to others, it's going to be nitpicked and maybe changed, that we exert our authority to say, wait a second, before the board finally approves this, we want to weigh in on whatever other version comes and then spit out a recommendation on that version.
Matt, I will not be bashful at all in my comments to Patty about the process and the considerations and so on and so forth. I think there will be a receptive audience with her, but we can decide that. Right now, the motion is on the floor is to vote tonight. And of course, if people would rather delay the vote, they certainly have the option to vote no on that motion, unless someone wants to go back and take a friendly amendment, which would be Becky to amend her motion to wait a week. I think that's Robert's Rules of Order, and not meaning just Mr. Elder. Okay?
Hey, just one point of discussion for timeline. What more is needed from us beyond this to give to the board? And are we going to by the way, there's a board meeting on February 1st, right? An SPJ board meeting.
Correct.
Is our goal to get it to the board meeting before, or to the board for presentation at that meeting? Or
I think that would be awesome if we can. We don't need to do that. It would certainly move things along.
April 1 was the deadline that I had set, because I was trying to make sure we got in that 120-day window and that type of thing. We certainly can do it earlier if people choose. Joel has been patient, and then Robert. Go ahead, Joel.
Well, I was just going to say, I think if there's an amendment to delay the vote, we have to vote on the amendment, and then we have to vote on the whole motion. I think that's the way Robert rules.
That's Robert's. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't know if so I guess we take a vote on Colin's proposal to delay. Is that correct?
No, actually, the motion on the floor is to vote to approve it tonight.
Right, but if somebody proposes an amendment to delay it,
yes,
a friendly amendment, we vote on the amendment first, and that changes the motion, right?
That hasn't been done yet.
Yes, so long as Becky and Maria would accept that as a friendly amendment, okay?
And my question is, how many people want to delay it? Because that makes a difference here.
Okay, please let Becky know whether you'd prefer to delay. I'm fine with the delay.
I have a question.
Okay, Robert.
So this is for Matt specifically. I think we have a unanimous consensus. I know there are a couple reservations. I want to give this the best possible chance to be adopted. So in that light, what will do that for us?
I think we still have the option that we can, send some type of memo or white paper, and we can certainly, if you would like, after we take the vote, have a discussion on whether we want to include that, what format you would like it to take, how that would be written. I agree. I think that gives more insight into all of our considerations and does make a stronger case. That's something I have thought would be good from the get-go. Okay, Matt?
Can I offer a suggestion that I think would make everyone happy? That we vote tonight to have Narissa as chair draft a 1-page or 2-page report to accompany our policy, and that next week we vote on that report and our policy, and we move it on.
Matt, is that your friendly amendment?
Yes.
I will accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, Maria, will you accept it as the person who seconded Becky's motion?
I will second that amendment.
Okay. All right, so we have on the floor, you just want me to have to work this weekend, Matt. I see what you're up to, dude.
It's early in the
It's
week.
keeping
Come on,
you
you
off
have
the
some
streets,
weekdays.
and out of trouble.
Yeah, well, I'm selling SPJ t-shirts at Senior Saturday. My weekend was already planned. So the motion on the floor is that we will come back next. Do we want to do it Monday or Tuesday? Because we moved it to Tuesday because of the holiday. Do we want to do it Monday?
Monday works.
Okay, so
Any date that we can all be, because I would say, to Robert's question, an 8-0 vote or a 9-0 vote, if our other member can join us, is going to be more powerful than a 5-0 vote.
Wait,
Yes.
what day is Monday? Is what day?
27.
27th of January.
Yeah. Okay.
And 9 o'clock Eastern, which has, again, we had to delay it because of a film screening tonight to 9:30. 9 o'clock Eastern next Monday to vote on the proposed policy that we have gone through tonight, and then also make any additions, deletions, or whatever to a proposed report that would accompany it that I'm in charge of writing. That is the motion on the floor. Any other discussion?
No.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. And the chair votes aye. It is unanimous. I
And I
have
can get the
not,
meeting set up.
I have not heard any other correspondence from Rebecca. Has anyone else? She was with us the first meeting, and I think we lost her after that.
I
Okay.
do think a 9-0 vote would be awesome. Do you want to reach out to her as chair, or I can try to reach out to her and just see if,
I'll holler back and see if we can get something from her and see if she can read this and get up to speed. Because I mean, I can just say, you know, she was absent or didn't participate or whatever else. Okay. All right. So thank you all very much. We'll have Jennifer set up the conference call again for next Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern. I'll try to send you a reminder. I'll get this put in a Word doc, and I'll also put the report in a Word doc, because the format may, and I'll double space so there's room for people to scribble in their own comments or whatever. Sound like a plan?
Sounds great.
Thank
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, is there a question? Hold this a second. Question, Andy, or comment?
Matt, going back to what you said before, that we want to make sure that we are still actively in part of the process once it goes to the board. Are you saying that if the board were to pick it apart and say, no, we want this instead, that it could then get bumped back to our group?
that's exactly what I'm saying. I think Robert and Colin and everyone on this call has worked too hard and put in too much time over years, not predating this task force, for us to like spend all this time trying to get a product that'll work, for it to be picked apart, as you know how the board works, and then not have a say in that. I think that
How does that fit with our time? How does that fit with our timeline, though? What's our drop dead deadline for the 120 days?
120 days.
Well, it would be 100, so it would be about mid-May, but I had imposed a May 1 deadline so that we were sure to get ahead of that time.
But if it goes to the board for a mid-April board meeting, and then it comes back to us, that doesn't give us any sense.
As soon as we have a vote and agree, I will notify Patty, and if they are having a February meeting and they want to put this on the agenda, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with them going ahead and looking at it early.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes
I
sense.
wouldn't mind that either.
Just for the record, my proposal to Patty would be to put this on the February 1st agenda and to have a discussion and maybe even a vote. If we can get a unanimous board decision on February 1st,
Okay.
if our whole thing is thinking of through EIJ and trying to figure out how the members are going to vote, if we can show them that we took this so seriously that we worked quickly and got unanimity at both the task force and the board, I mean, this may be asking way too much.
Okay.
That part makes sense. The
Earlier
April
better.
Yep.
not.
Okay. All right. All hearts and minds clear, as the preacher says at the end of the revival meeting. Okay. Thank you so much for a productive meeting and your hard work. We'll talk next Monday, and I hope just for a very short period of time. Love you all. All right. Bye-bye.
Night.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Change that smoke alarm battery.